Should a DP edit? There's a lot of ways to approach this question. I want to think of it in 3 to 4 different prong approach and perspectives. A friend of mine who I met through a director friend, they shot a feature film together. And this DP, we went swimming together in a waterfall, and we actually got in trouble by the police. Luckily, they didn't charge us. We weren't arrested. We were let free. I met up with him afterwards, and I wanted to, talk shop a little bit. I was very surprised when I found out that he never touches post-production. I would always think to myself, in an ideal world, I would shoot this beautiful footage, I would pass it on and never have to think about it again and move on to shooting something else. And I think one aspect of this is the desire for mastery. And the idea is that if you want to become masterful at something, you need to dedicate decades and decades into something, and you don't want to be distracted by other things like learning post-production software, delving into this entire world of post-production, and just simply focusing on aspects like pre-production and production itself. And I could see how you can become a better DP much faster in that way in some regards, but at the same time you're limited in many ways. For example, not every project is going to be a feature film with millions of dollars of budget where you can have a proper team to do post-production. So in cases where you want to do spec shoots, for example, you want to do passion projects, for example, and you don't want to spend thousands of your own money towards hiring an editor, hiring a colorist, then you can save a lot of money by doing it yourself. Now, I'm not saying that this is the right way to do it every single time. There's also been times in my DP career where I feel like my editing skills, my coloring skills have limited my final deliverable output quality as well. So I think this is not really actually that easy of a question, but if I were to answer this question as simply as possible, I would say yes, a DP should edit. And if you think about it from another prong, another perspective, a business perspective, I had a very good month as a freelancer this year, but actually 50% of my income came from editing. Another layer to that is I didn't sacrifice any DP work to do this editing. So if I'm able to make an extra 6 months of rent from editing, from a business point of view, that gives me much more runway to pursue my DP dream. And I'm not saying that editing is something that you can just pick up over a few months or a few years. It's actually a very, very deep and complex subject that I'm constantly learning about. I like to read newsletters and learn as much as I can from professional editors during my downtime, because I also believe that that informs me and makes me a better DP when I'm shooting on set. To be able to shoot for the edit, to be able to have empathy and to consider whoever is going to be editing this footage, that you give them the best possible ingredients possible to have the highest quality output. There are other DPs, professional DPs, who also agree with me. And when they're shooting, they're always considering how this is going to edit together. And I think this is particularly true in narrative filmmaking. And I've been pivoting into narrative filmmaking more these past few years. My foundation was in documentary filmmaking, where I think it's a little bit different, because if you're a documentary DP, sometimes the story is not crafted prior to shooting. And when you're shooting, you're figuring things out as they unfold, and you're reacting to the changing of environments, the changing of talent that you're filming. There's so many variables, so many things changing all the time. Regardless, if you can think ahead and plan ahead, it will definitely help you in the long run. Should a DP ever edit? Honest answer. And I would say yes. A DP should edit, not all the time, but if you have a strong foundation in editing and you're a DP, it will only make you a better DP in the long run, assuming that you're not sacrificing your DP skills and the time that you're committing to honing and developing your DP craft, and you're putting that towards editing. If you have a solid foundation in editing as well, that will only make you a more hireable DP in the long run. I made 50% of my income editing this month as a DP. And I think this is huge, because as things are changing, the industry is changing, there's so many variables. Regardless if you're making money from editing or not, you should have multiple streams of income. That will set you up for the best long-term success as a DP, because there's always going to be dry spells. There's always going to be seasons, months during the year where you're not as busy as other months. And if you're able to make money to fuel your passion projects, to create your own projects, in terms of the business side, it will help you tremendously. Why I started editing and what it did to my cinematography. So my backstory is I actually started with Windows Movie Maker almost 30 years ago. So that's my start into editing, and there's always more to learn about editing. And something that I think is fascinating that I keep on revisiting recently is that editing, you need to prioritize emotion. I'm not saying that it's more than 50% of the final of the things that you should focus about on editing, but that is one way to look at it. Is that if you want true emotion, and sure in this day and age of social media, a lot of times they're not going to put edit, they're not going to focus on emotions. They're just going to want a hook. They just want something to grab your attention or whatever. But that's not the type of editing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about really doing a deep dive into editing. And when you're watching a movie, for example, rewatching scenes and breaking it down how it's edited. Something I like to do is reverse engineer films that I really like, or it could be trailers, it could be commercials, it could be short films, whatever you'd like. Put it into your timeline, and then I actually do a manual cut each time the editor did a cut. And then I like to zoom out and look at the pacing of the edit and kind of see how, try to use my logic, but also emotionally understand why they chose to pace in that way and why they cut from, why did they cut at this certain time, whether it was a dialogue, was it cutting on action, was it a match cut? And in terms of framing and composition, was it center framed? And when they cut again, was it also center framed? Or did they go from, left frame to right frame to kind of make the viewer move their eyes around? There's so much into editing. I'm not even talking about color grading. I'm talking about physically cutting the raw footage into a logical sequence. DP who never edits versus the DP who edits everything. So I would say these two are extremes. A DP who never edits and a DP who edits everything. These are extremes that I don't believe are going to set you up for the best success in the long run. I think the best is somewhere in the middle, a sliding scale, depending on the project, depending on the constraints, depending on how busy you are. Does editing make you a better DP? Absolutely. And the caveat is you are not sacrificing DP cases to edit, but instead you are maybe advancing both equally at the same time. After each shoot, you're putting it into DaVinci Resolve, you're doing your own rough edits, regardless of whether that's going to be the final deliverable or if it's just practice to kind of see, how your shots come together, if you properly expose your shots, things that you can improve composition-wise, camera movement-wise. But should a DP ever edit? Absolutely yes. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts below. Do you like editing? We will have strong emotional connection to certain shots. We invested our time and our energy and our passion into executing the shot. We absolutely want it to be in the edit. But if you pass it on to an editor who was not attached to the production side, and they strictly look at the story, they strictly look at the emotion, and they look at all the footage that your team captured, and that beautiful shot that you chose doesn't belong in the edit, they can make that decision much easier than a DP who has a strong connection to that shot. So this is a very nuanced discussion, and I think this can continue on into a much longer video, but I want to keep this short, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.